What is up? Daniel here with the Virtual Robotics Studio, and we're back to get you started on your programming journey. So there's a lot of software or setup that has to happen, or hardware setup that has to happen before you can start programming. You're going to have to image the RoboRio. You're going to have to update all of the Spark Maxes and Talon FXs, which are on the Kraken motors, as well as probably the Carnivore and the Pigeon are going to need updates to this season. So you're going to have to connect to all of the devices and do that. Now, in order for us to get this video out to you as soon as possible, we're basically going to show you us doing this for the Cross the Road stuff when we did Swerve last year, and for the few components that are specific to Kitbot from our Kitbot video this year. It's exactly the same, just be aware that you might see slightly different robots as we go through that process. The one thing I'll say, though, about especially last year's Swerve videos, we're going to be talking about, hey, you need the 2025 latest version. Obviously, this Kitbot is for the 2026 season. So everything's going to be the same, but look for the latest 2026 version of the firmware. Same thing for Kitbot. We filmed those videos a little while ago. It's possible there are new firmware versions, so always just pick the latest version for this year's season. All right, so let's get all of the firmware and updates done on our robot. But before we do, let's give another special thanks to Argosy. First, Cross the Road Electronics, West Coast Products, Aramco, and Team 302, Lake Orion High School, for hosting our studio. All right, so the first thing we want to do is, if you can get on your computer, we're going to go to this docs.wpilive.org/en/stable/index.html. And this is sort of the main hub for the control system. This has, again, it's the WPI Lib, and WPI Lib does a lot of the libraries that we use in order to make our programming a little bit easier. Kind of takes care of a lot of the low-level stuff, so we can just be like talking about turning motors on for a certain amount of time or whatever, instead of having to worry about specifically telling it like, oh, find this pin and this much voltage and stuff like that. So a lot of the things are going to be linked to from this page, and we can kind of go through their step-by-step process here. So there is sort of like an introduction, kind of tells you what's going on. There is building your robot. There's a little bit of wiring tips and tricks here. We're ready to skip past all that and go to step 2, which is installing software. So on installing software, we have offline installation preparation, or we can just go to each of the individual places. If you're not going to have internet available when you're doing the install stuff, you can always do this offline preparation, which is downloading all the files so that you have them and they're ready to go. And then when you get to your shop or whatever, where maybe you don't have internet, you'll be able to just use those files. But since I have internet here, I'm going to go ahead and click through the ones we need and just do the online installers. So the first thing is, if you are going to be programming in LabVIEW, which almost nobody does anymore, and we will not be for these videos, we'll be using Java. But if you've decided to do LabVIEW, make sure you install this first, installing LabVIEW for FRC. The first thing we need to install is installing the FRC game tools. So if you click on that, that's going to take you to this page about installing the FRC game tools, which is basically going to get us some LabVIEW stuff. It's going to give us the FRC driver station, which is LabVIEW based. And then it's going to give us the imaging tool and images, which is what we need to put on our RoboRio to get it up to date for this season. You need Windows 10 or higher, so Windows 10 or 11 basically. And then it basically is saying we're going to click download and let it install everything. So if you go to the FRC Game Tools page from NI, so there's download the game tools here. If you click on that, that will take you to the NI page. I'm going to reject all the cookies. And what you might see, you can see I'm logged in. I have an account up here, and that's what gives me this download button. If you're not logged in, it's going to say log in to download here. And you do have to make an account. It is free. You just have to give it an email address, and I think you got to click through to confirm that your email address is real. But it's not such a big deal. But once you've done that, then back on this page, you will have the download button. So we're going to go ahead and click download. And sure, let's just save that. If it doesn't start automatically, you can click the link. Cool. All right, so that is downloaded. You can click on it here, right? Or you can go to your downloads folder. We want to run that file. So I'll double click on it again. Do you want to allow this to make changes? Yes, we want that to install. And you might have to do this as an administrator. So again, if this is a school computer, you might need to get your IT department to get this stuff going. With this, it's pretty easy. Just you got to accept the agreements, say next. You don't have to change anything here. This is just telling you what is going to install. Click next again. And now it's going to go out, and basically it's downloading and installing at the same time. And that's why if you're doing this offline, you can do a full big download where you get the file at once, and then it doesn't have to do the downloading part. But it'll install everything it needs. We'll just kind of give this a minute. All right, that is now done. That took us about, I want to say 3 minutes total to download and install. So if you're somewhere in that neighborhood, plus or minus a bit, don't worry, it's going to be OK. And now it wants us to reboot the computer. So we're just going to let that do its thing. All right, now that everything's rebooted, you might have to log back into the various websites, get back to that docs.wpilive.org page. And one thing that I should have mentioned before we downloaded and installed, if you have previous versions of the game tools, it is recommended that you uninstall them. So you can do that now, or if you haven't done the install yet, you can go ahead and do that before running the install. Now, it is recommended to do this. I have had it work completely fine, just installing the new version and not had any issues. So it will probably work, no issues, but it is nice to uninstall the old version just to make sure that there is no conflicts. All right, so now we did FRC Game Tools. If I go back to step 2, installing software, I can either click there or back here. So we did FRC Game Tools. The only other thing we need from this list of stuff is the WPI Live installation guide. So let's go to that one. And let's see. Looks like you can use Windows 10 for this season, but maybe not next year. So Windows 10 or Windows 11 is what you're going to need. If you scroll down, eventually you'll get to downloading. We have the WPI Live 2026 release. Get the newest date. So mine says January 9th, 2026. If yours is a date that is newer than that, that's great. Use that one. Occasionally, there are updates that happen during the season, but probably it will end up being the same thing. So go ahead and click that download button and save the file. This big download for Windows. There are other platforms that you might be able to get this to work on. And WPI Live, which is basically the environment that we're going to be programming on, will work on other operating systems. I think that you can get it to work on Mac OS, probably Linux. I don't know for sure. But the FRC Game Tools really needs to be a Windows laptop. Like when you go out to the field with a driver station laptop, that's going to be the thing that connects to your robot for your controllers and stuff like that. That one needs to be Windows. So you got to source a Windows laptop from somewhere. OK, our download is going here. It looks like it's a pretty big 2.4 gigabyte download. So that's going to take a few minutes. We're going to let that run. When that's done downloading, we'll come back and start installing it. All right, download is finished. Let's go ahead and get WPI Live installed. So once again, we're going to just run the file that we downloaded. Actually, we're going to open it. It is an ISO file, so that's it's like an image. And I think at least in Windows 11 and I think Windows 10, when you click on it, you're going to get this option to open. And so go ahead and do that. And you can choose Windows Explorer. And this should let's try opening it. There we go. All right. It basically thinks it's like a DVD or something, so it gives us this DVD drive which has all of the files on it. Then from here, you can click on the WPI Live installer application, or double click to run that. And I think it's going to give us this error. It's going to pop up probably on your computer as well. A Windows protected your PC. It's basically saying, I don't know what this is. It's trying to make a lot of changes to your computer, and we don't trust it. So that's why it's giving you this don't run button down here, which lets you cancel out. But we know this is correct. We went to the right place. We got the right file. So we do need to install this. If you click the More Info link here, that's going to tell you what the app is. It's going to tell you unknown publisher, and that's probably the problem. It's not registered with Windows. But now we have the option to click Run Anyway, and that's what you're going to have to do. Click the Run Anyway button to let it install, despite the fact that Windows doesn't know what it is. All right, and you'll get this pop-up. We're going to do Start. And we need to do everything. There are some cases where if you only need specific things on the computer that you're working on, you could do tools only, but we're going to do everything. You can either install for just the current user that's logged in or all users. It doesn't really make a difference. I usually just do for all users. And then we have a few choices here. If you're installing this on one computer and maybe a second computer, but you can do them kind of at the same time and you have decent internet, then just choose download for this computer only fastest. This is going to go out, basically download and install the files as we go. There's some extra files that you need, VS Code and so on. You can do this download VS Code archives to share with others. If you download this, you can then pass that file to other computers. And on those other computers, you can do select existing VS Code archive, and you won't have to do the download. So if you do this once, it's going to take a long time. But when you do it a second or third time, it's going to be faster. So if you've got a bunch of teen laptops to set up, you might want to do the archive and then the existing. But you can also just do the download for this computer over and over again for everybody. Do not use the skip and don't use VS Code button. That one is not what you want. So I'm going to do download for this computer only. And it looks like it's going fast. I think this is the fast progress bar. Now we click Next once that one's done. So we get done downloading, click Next. And then this is the longer install. So this is going to take a few minutes. Once again, we're going to disappear and come back when this is done installing. All right, I think it has basically finished. We did get a few things pop up as it was installing. It popped up kind of other windows that did their own thing to help the install process. And now we have this pop up, which is, do you want to allow it to make changes to your device? Any of these that you get, just say yes when they come up. I think that's pretty much the end. You get that right at the very end. Finished installing, press Finish to exit. Perfect. And if we look now at our desktop, you're going to have, so from the game tools, the first thing we installed, you get the FRC driver station and the RoboRio imaging tool. And then from WPI Live, we have WPI Live documentation. We have WPI Live VS Code. And then there is the WPI Live tools. Really, we're just going to run the VS Code one. It's kind of weird because it has the same icon as the documentation, so we'll have to make sure to get the right one later. But we're going to use all three of those programs at some point. But let's finish downloading and installing the software that we know we're going to need, and then we'll go use all the software at once. OK, so WPI Live installation is done. Again, you can read through the instructions here as well. For any extra things that maybe I didn't mention. I think we basically got everything, and looks like, yes, there is some macOS and Linux stuff. You can either click the Next button here, or actually we want to go to Preparing Your Robot, Step 3. So Step 3, Preparing Your Robot. This has Imaging Your RoboRio 2. It also has Programming Your Radio. So let's go ahead and click on Imaging Your RoboRio 2.0. And this one, basically, there is a new image that our RoboRio needs on the robot every year. And the RoboRio, of course, being sort of like the main computer in the robot. And there are two different types of RoboRios that you might have. If you are a new team, anytime in the past few years, you will have been given a RoboRio 2. It actually says on it, like if we look in the robot, on the RoboRio, I think it's labeled on there. Yep, underneath the kind of NI in that middle section, we've got our label here, which says RoboRio 2.0. Obviously, the 1.0 will not say that. So if you have this RoboRio 2.0, that's how you know you have a 2. Also, I think that there is extra USB ports, and there is an SD card slot hanging out right here. So if you have any of those things, you've got the RoboRio 2.0. The label's probably the most obvious way to figure it out. All right, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to do the setup for RoboRio 2.0. But if you have a really old RoboRio, go ahead and do the Imaging Your RoboRio 1, which is a little bit different. You won't need the next bit of software we download because you don't have to image a SD card and then put it into the RoboRio. Instead, you would just connect directly and sort of flash the memory that's on there. All right, so I'm going to click on Imaging Your RoboRio 2.0. And if we scroll down, there is going to be some software here. So essentially what this is telling us is from the game tools, we're going to be able to get the image. So that new image file we already got downloaded to our computer, that is tied to the version of the FRC game tools that we downloaded from National Instruments. So we'll be able to find the file from there. But to actually use the file, we have to do this in a little bit different way. So if you're using a RoboRio 1.0, that you kind of see there's like this format target option here. That works if you're doing the 1.0. You can select the file and do format target. But if you're using a 2.0, we have to write it to the micro SD card. And we kind of have two choices to do that. We can either use Balena Etcher, or we can use Raspberry Pi Imager. If you are familiar with either of these, they both work fine, so you can pick the one you're used to. I've always used Balena Etcher because it was the first link on the page. And I've never had a problem with it, so no reason to change. I will also reject your cookies, and we'll download Etcher here. All right, so we went there, we clicked the GitHub link, and it was throwing some security errors. It seems like the school network that we're connected to had some stuff that was blocking it. So now when I click on the download Etcher button, it takes me directly to a list of files instead of the download from GitHub. So that might be a problem that pops up for you. I think you can follow through to the GitHub page. I'm not sure why it was saying it was unsecure. You can search for the GitHub page separately. There probably is a download link there, but it might be better to just either tether your phone or grab this really quickly from home and download it to avoid those problems. So we have all of the options here. We can do Etcher for Windows, Mac OS, or Linux. I'm going to do Windows because that's what my computer is. And we will just go ahead and save that file. All right, and see, this is where it says it's done, but the progress bar is still there. All right, there we go. So we'll go ahead and run that file. I think it's possible I clicked on it twice. So the second one says you can't do it again. Here comes the first one. All right. So it turns out this one doesn't actually need really any installing. It just sort of runs. So we've got this up now. All right. The next thing that you have to do is you have to find a way to get the SD card connected to your computer. So first on the robot, and also I'm going to pull my battery wire out of the way for now, just so we get a little bit better access in here. Yep. And so on that SD card slot, so it's kind of in between the printer USB port and the regular USB ports, or the USB Type A ports. We've got this spot right in the middle for the SD card. And if you push down on the card, it should, if you get it, pop up. Oh, OK, well, that popped up a lot. And now my card is down here. And I got it. All right, so we need to get our little SD card out of the RoboRio. So we need some way to connect this to the computer. So there are kind of two major options that might work for you. OK, so if your laptop has like a full SD card slot, there are some of these full-size cards that have a little adapter for the micro SD card that would fit into it. And then I have a slot on my computer that this would plug into. And then the other option is there are just these USB dongles that it actually has room for a full-size slot to go in, but it also actually has directly room to plug in the micro SD card. And so either of those should work. I mean, I guess now I'm in this one, so we'll go ahead and plug that USB into my computer. And then we're going to flash from file, but we got to do kind of a little thing to get the file here first. And so if you go to your desktop, it created this RoboRio imaging tool shortcut. If you don't see it there, you can probably find it, RoboRio imaging tool, in your list of programs as well, in your start menu. But go ahead and run that. That's going to get us the file that we need to flash onto this SD card. OK, Okay, so that will run this window here, which is our FRC imaging tool window. And what you want to do is click on the SD card folder picture right here. This will open up the location of SD images. And when we click on that, we're going to see that there is RoboRio 2 2026 version 1.2. If your version is newer than this, that's good. That works for you. If it's older than this, then you need to go find at least this version. Occasionally, there are updates during the season where you might need to get a new version. And that usually only happens if they find some bug that they need to fix. We need this location. And actually, so in Windows at least, if you kind of click up here, this is just an address bar. So I can copy that whole address, highlight it all, and Control-C. And now, if we go back to our Balena etcher, we're going to choose Flash from File. And if I click up at the top here, I can paste in that whole address that I had, hit Enter, and now here is that file. You can also copy this file and put it somewhere else that's easier to find, or just remember the location and browse to it. We're going to say Open. Next thing it wants is to select our target, so we'll do Select Target. This is my micro SD device, USB device, so that it should be showing up here. I'm going to check that one. There is like this show hidden. You need to be careful, like especially if it's labeled system drive. Definitely do not do that, because this is going to basically wipe out everything that's on the drive and write only the like image for this season's RoboRio 2. So make absolutely sure you're not hitting like a random thumb drive or a backup hard drive or the SD card with your photos from your camera on it or whatever. Make sure that nothing else is plugged in. And that's why you probably don't want to show the hidden devices. But make sure you're on your SD card, click Select. And then the last thing we have to do is just click the Flash button. And it's saying, hey, do you want to let the thing do its thing? And in this case, yes, we do. Okay, and this is going to say it's decompressing the image. While this is kind of running, there is kind of a shortcut that it put on the desktop. If it doesn't work for you, one thing that you can try is if you close it down and then you can right-click the shortcut here and choose Run as Administrator. And that may allow it some of the permissions that it needs to run. Of course, if it's a school computer and you don't have administrator privileges, well, that's its own problem as well. All right, we are kind of cruising along, 70%. Estimating 6 more seconds. The number went up. All right. So it's written, now it's going to do it one more time. It's going to run through basically the whole thing again and validate it. We'll let that run. Okay, finishing. Seems like a good thing. And finished. Okay. So make sure you really get to this Flash completed page. It takes a while when it's a full bar and it looks like it's 100% before it gets here, but that's okay. All right, so we can now close this down. We can close this down. We can look and see if the USB drive still exists. Okay, it's not there, so we don't have to worry about it. I clicked on it and it's not accessible because it's not formatted for Windows. It's formatted for the RoboRio. We can close that down as well. We can go back to our website. We're going to unplug now the SD card from the computer. I can take the dongle out as well and kind of put that off on the side. Now we got to get this back into the RoboRio. Once again, that SD card port where we took it out, in between the USB printer square port and USB A's, that's where we got to put it back in. And in this case, if you saw the direction it was facing when we took it out, put it back in the same way. But if not, I believe we've got these gold pins on here. Those pins are going to be facing the Ethernet port or the USB-A ports. And then on the other side of this is the side with the writing. And that writing is going to be facing towards the square printer port or these power wires that I'm going to try to keep out of the way so we can see what's going on. All right, so I'm going to have those pins facing towards the USB-C, or towards the USB-A and the Ethernet. And you basically just got to push it down. And if you push it down enough, it'll click into place. So if you push down and it doesn't come back up, then you got it. If it pops back up, just try again. You got to push it a little bit farther. All right, so that is in the RoboRio. We have a few more steps that we're going to have to do with the RoboRio as well. So let's do that now. You're going to need a battery to power up your robot. All right, so I'll go ahead and plug the battery in so we can power it. You could do this inside the robot. I'm just going to leave the battery outside right now. So I'm going to be reaching in here and doing stuff, and this leaves me some more access. And the other thing we're going to need is a USB cable. So this one should be USB, I think actually a USB A to A cable would work, or again, like that printer cable where it goes to the square end. And that's the one I have. So I'm going to plug this into my computer on one end, and then the other end, we're going to come into the RoboRio and plug that other end in as well. All right, so now that we're plugged in, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the robot. And now we've got some lights going on our RoboRio, which is what we want to see. And on the computer, we want to go back to that RoboRio imaging tool. And this is going to search for RoboRios. If it finds nothing, if it says no targets found, go ahead and click rescan. It does take the RoboRio, I don't know, like 30 seconds to a minute to boot up. So if you just turned power on and you had the thing plugged in and you're running this right away, it might not have finished booting and it won't find it until it's done booting. So we'll go ahead and do this. It is possible to do this as well with an Ethernet cable, but I find that when I try to do it with the Ethernet cable, there are more things that can go wrong, and sometimes it's harder to find it. Let's rescan yet again. And it should show up this time. OK, not showing up after I got through telling you the USB was better. I'm going to try plugging it into a different USB port on my computer and then hit rescan yet again. OK, it's popping up a let Windows have access. It says this needs access to your stuff. I don't think it actually does, but I'm going to click yes just because that gives it the best chance of working. And we'll see here as we scan. It does look like it is fully booted up. There we go. We found it. I don't know why. I think it might have needed that pop-up to say yes, and I don't know why that pop-up didn't happen the first 3 times I scanned, but that seemed to work. So maybe changing your USB port will sort of reinitialize everything and make it realize it needs that permission. But you can see now I found a RoboRio and RoboRio 2. It's got some numbers that, whatever, serial numbers on it. It's got its unique MAC address and stuff like that. We're not going to format target here. That only works for the RoboRio 1, really. Instead, what we're going to do is edit our startup settings. And we have to put our team number in order for that to work out. So in this box, you're going to put the team number that you're using. I think mine was 5599. I don't know. I change it every year based on the available stencils I have for the bumper. So put your team number in. We're going to do the edit startup settings. There are some reasons why you might want console out, or where you might want to disable the RT Startup app, but if you know you need to check those, you'll know. Otherwise, just leave them blank. And then we're going to click Apply. So this is basically telling the RoboRio how to behave when it boots up, but also giving it your team number. And that team number is going to drive a lot of things. That's going to drive the address, its network address, so that other devices are going to be able to find it, like your driver station, like the radio that's here on the side of the robot. So for all of those things to work together, you have to have your team number set in various places. And the team number is going to actually determine the IP address of it. You can see right now the current IP is 10.0.1.100. That's going to eventually be 10.yourteam, the first digits of your team number, dot the second digits of your team number, dot 100. So like for me, I'm 5599. Mine was going to be 10.55.99. And I think it ends up being dot 4. The RoboRio has a specific address. I think the radio is dot 1, but the same network, the same first 3 exchanges. So it's doing that, all the settings. This takes a little while. Don't worry about it. Just have some patience. All right. I think it is rebooting or rebooted at this point. Should be done any second now. And then we will do one more test after this. We'll do one more test to make sure that everything is updated correctly and that the RoboRio is ready to go. All right, on your robot, if you look at the lights on the RoboRio over here, if your top light is green for power and the bottom RSL light is kind of gone solid, I think that indicates it's done booting. So it's gone through the whole reboot process. But of course, on my screen, I still have configuring RoboRio, startup settings, and rebooting. So at this point, you could try just closing this. And we could open it again and rescan, but I'm just going to go to the next step to verify it. So the driver station is what we're looking for. Go ahead and run your driver station software. Say yes, let it do whatever it needs to do. And this one, you can see it has that like little shield, which I think means it has to run as administrator to work to be able to do the stuff that it's doing. All right, and then if we go to so this is the driver station software. We're going to talk even more about this later. But we have different modes. We can be in teleoperated, which is driver control, autonomous, which is the robot is pre-programmed to do stuff. We have practice mode, which goes through the full sequence that the field is going to go through. And we have test mode, which is just for testing code. But if you go to the diagnostics tab, what we can actually see is we see the robot, and we see Wi-Fi, we see USB. We do have some firewall issues that we're going to take care of. But first, we want to make sure that we can kind of connect up to our RoboRio. So if you click on the third tab, which is Setup, this is where you put your team number. So whatever your team number is, go ahead and type that in here. And when you click out of this window, that should update with the team number here. Now, if you're plugged in with USB, it looks like we get communication even if you don't have the team number put in. But later, when we go to connect either wirelessly or with an Ethernet cable, if your team number is wrong, it's not going to work. So that's one of the things that you have to come back and check. But essentially, at this point, what we're seeing on the second tab down, this is sort of our like information tab, we can see the RoboRio is there. We can see that this is the version of the firmware on the RoboRio, which if you remember that 2026 v1.2 is the version that we were trying to flash it to or image it to. So we know that that's working. And then because we have kind of the light, you can see battery voltage and stuff like that. Those are all indications that everything is connected correctly. So at this point, we can believe that we flashed our RoboRio the way we wanted. But there's one more thing that we want to take care of here before we move on. And that is the firewall. So you can see that next to firewall, I have domain, public, and private. If you have any of these showing up, you will ideally want to turn them off when you're trying to communicate with your robot. The firewall can sometimes block things and make communication not work the way that you want it to work. So to turn off the firewall, if you kind of do a search or you hit Windows and start typing, we're looking for firewall. And when you type in firewall, you'll see there is Windows Defender Firewall with Advanced. That's not Windows Defender Firewall, but Windows Defender Firewall with Advanced something is the one you want to click on. Advanced Security, apparently. And once this window pops up, there is the domain profile, private profile, and public profile. And below that, we have the Windows Defender Firewall properties. Now, basically, not usually when you connect to a network, it might be a private network or a public network, and it will have different rules for that. But we want to always make sure the firewall is off, especially when you're at competition and going out for a match. So if you click on this Windows Defender Firewall settings link or firewall properties link down here on the bottom, we now have the domain firewall, which is on. You can click this pull down and turn it off. You can go to the private profile, turn it off, and you can go to the public profile and turn it off. And then you can say OK, and it's going to be off, off, off. And you probably will start getting Windows pop-ups telling you, hey, you really should turn this back on. And if we go back here, now my firewall light is green. I have none of the firewalls turned off. OK, now if you're using the same computer to go out on the internet to search for stuff while you're search for code help or things like that, you might want to consider turning the firewall back on in between. Just know that that is one of the troubleshooting steps. If you go to connect to your robot and it can't find it, sometimes just turning the firewall off fixes that. All right, so this is all looking good now. We are connected here. We can close out of these. We don't need these right now. We'll talk more about them later. And the next thing we're going to do is I'm actually going to turn the robot off. So I'll hit that red button, push it down to turn off the robot. The next thing we have to do is we have to update all of our speed controllers, our SparkMax speed controllers, and we can, in fact, also update the power distribution hub, the big thing in the middle of our robot. And to do all of those, these are made by a company called Rev Robotics. So usually I just search Rev Hardware Client, because that's what the software is called. And we want the Rev Hardware Client. I guess we can go straight to installation. So I think the safest thing for us to do, because I think the SparkMaxes are considered Rev Ion products, let's just get this Hardware Client 2. So we'll click on that. That's the latest version. It's 2026. And then we're going to do Rev Hardware Client 2 download all versions. And I guess, sure. Install and launch. Sounds good to me. We'll click that. And then, again, we can either go to the folder and run it, or we can just run it right from the browser. But we want to run that file. All right, so it finished installing. The screen popped up. I guess we can switch between dark mode and light mode. But really what we're looking for is, well, we have all of the available files here. So the versions that everything is on, 26.1. I think all of this is probably up to date, the latest version. And we can check our downloaded files here. All right, what we want to do is on the hardware tab, we don't see anything because we're not plugged into anything. And I think the best way to go about connecting stuff is in the Power Distribution Hub box. I think we saved it before, but there is one longer USB-C cable. And that's what we want to use for this. There were a bunch of short USB-C cables in all of the, what were they, the SparkMax boxes. But the long one is nice because we'll be able to reach from our computer from far away. And I'm going to unplug. We'll unplug the one from the RoboRio here. Move that out of the way. And we're going to switch to plugging in this just USB-C cable. And we're going to work our way through all of the Rev devices, plugging into them and updating them. And I think we'll start here. I think I don't need battery power for a second, so I'm going to unplug this just to get this wire. I really want this wire completely out of the way, but I don't know if that's in the cards for me. All right, we'll just kind of let that hang out. So yeah, this SparkMax is for this motor, which will run the feed wheel. We want to get plugged into that. It's a little hard to see for me on this side, but we've got our USB-C port here next to the yellow and green CAN wires. So what we want to do is just take the other end of that USB-C cable and plug it in like that. And when it's plugged in, it actually is going to be able to power. It's not going to be able to power the motors that are connected to the speed controller, but it can power the logic board that's in here and hopefully let us connect to it. Okay, and so we're hoping to get it to show up here. It looks like, let me try going back to the USB port that worked instead of the one that didn't work. And there we go. So we now have it spinning. It's saying loading devices. Let's give it a second to hopefully find this device. Okay, so if your device does not stop spinning, mine is still spinning loading devices. It's been quite a while. That might mean that what we have to do is basically update them in a slightly different way. So on the Rev site again, so we're on the Rev Hardware Client 2 site, if we start scrolling down, it says Rev devices must be running firmware versions 26.x.x or newer to be compatible with the Hardware Client 2. If it's an old firmware that's in there, then we might have to do this recovery mode. So depending on when you got your Spark Maxes, they might have the right firmware version and just work, in which case you lucked out. Mine seems to not work, so we're going to have to go through this recovery mode situation. So if we go down to the recovery mode section here, it basically is going to say we need something to press the button on the Spark Max. And it says like a paper clip or a SIM card. I have a really tiny screwdriver point that I'll use. And then we need that USB-C to A cable, which we already have, and the computer with Rev Client 2 installed. So we're going to hold the button down first, then plug it in to power it. And then the Rev Hardware Client 2 should hopefully find the thing, and then we can select from there to install the new version. So let's give that a try. I'm going to load up the Rev Hardware Client here. So we have to power it off first. I think it's easier for me in this case to unplug from my computer side. So now we have no light on the thing. It's off. Then we have the status light over here. On the other side, there's a mode button. And that is sort of the button that we can use to reset it. So I've got this really tiny screwdriver point. Again, a paper clip or a SIM card tool or something like that would work. You should feel it click, like when it goes in. There's an audible like click, and you can feel it really being pressed. So you make sure that's pressed down. When that's pressed down, then I can take the other end and plug it into my computer, the USB port here. So we'll plug that in. And when we do that, again, it said eventually, and it happened really quickly. So for connected devices now, I have this recovery device. I'm going to click on that. And I think at this point, by the way, you can stop holding the button down. Once you get into this point and you've booted with the button held down, you don't have to keep holding it. We are doing a Spark Max, and we want to upgrade to 26.1.0, which is the latest. Again, if your number is bigger than this, if it's 26.1.1, use that. But this is the latest version at the time that I am doing this. So I'm going to click download and install. And it would have been nice if it gave me a little bit more of an indication that it did something. I think it did. So let's close that and give it a second here. So we see recovery device. Go ahead and click on that. And then select a device. We're doing the Spark Max. And this is the latest firmware. Also, I think you can, by the way, at this point, let go of the mode button. Once you actually get to click on the recovery device, it's in recovery mode. You don't have to keep holding the button down. And then click install. And this should take a second. Now, I was running into a bug earlier when we were testing this where this screen, this updating thing, would immediately flash to like updated and disappear. And I didn't have a chance to really even see what was going on. If you're getting that problem, that might also be like your school's network blocking some files or some downloads. So we switched over to a hotspot here. and we're able to get it updated. So now we have our Spark Max. We might as well update these kind of as we go. So now if you click on that Spark Max, there are a few things that we need to set here. So the first thing is right at the top under CAN ID. This is going to be each device needs to get an ID for where it is on the network, and they all have to be different. So right now, when we do this update, they're all going to show up as device 0. But we can't have, what do we have, 6 device 0s. We have the 4 drivetrain motors, the shooter/intake, and then we have the feed motor. So we have 6 different motors that we have to power. So we have to number them. We can start at 0, we can start at 1, it doesn't matter, but we can't all have them be 0. And I think I like to start at 1 just because 0 is where any new devices are going to show up. And that way, when the new device gets plugged in, if we added another speed controller for something later, it would start at 0 and we would be able to know that it was that 0. There wouldn't be anything else that's already on that position. So what I think we're going to do is we have 4 drive motors. We can do those as 1, 2, 3, and 4, or you can do them as 0, 1, 2, and 3. And then we have our 2 fuel mechanism motors, which then can be 5 and 6 or 4 and 5, or you could just do 5 and 6 no matter what and leave a space if you did 0 through 3. So this one is our feed motor out here. So I'm going to go ahead and make that one 5. And if you click out of the box, it will go ahead and update the CAN ID. So now we can see that CAN ID is 5. You have the button down here to save changes. We do have to make one more change, though, so let's see if we can do 2 different pages at the same time. If you go to Configuration tab here, the type of motor is a brushed motor. So there are brushed motors and brushless motors. Again, when we didn't use the white cables, that means it was a brushed motor, or these sim motors are brushed motors. Idle mode, we can choose. I think we want coast. Does it matter? It doesn't really matter which one you pick. So coast, when you cut power, it will just sort of cut power and let the thing freewheel a little bit at the end. If you choose brake, what it does is if you remember all the way back to when we were doing the chassis, and I said if the wires are connected together, it sort of feeds that electricity back in the motor the opposite direction, and it made the wheels harder to turn. That's what brake does. Brake actually, inside of the speed controller, will connect those 2 motor outputs together. So any electricity that's being generated from the motor gets fed back to the motor in the opposite direction, which will make it stop faster. Now, because these are both things that are spinning very, very fast, sometimes it's not great to try to like abruptly stop them quickly. In this case, it's probably OK. There's nothing that's really going to take a big. You'll get some whack on the gear teeth or something like that maybe, but it's not going to be a disaster either way. But I think in general, I prefer going coast, and then this can be changed in software in the code once we get to that step. So once you have those changes, we'll kind of look at the other screens really quickly. So utilities, if we have the robot powered on, we could actually use this to run the motor to do testing. You can change the set point for how fast you want it to spin, 1 being full speed forward, 0 being stop, and -1 being full speed reverse. So you can use spacebar to start stop, or you can click run motor and stop motor. So this would give you a way, if you don't have a program yet, to test your motors, to test your robot mechanically and see if that particular subsystem is working. And then we have the update tab. So if you go to the update tab, you might find that the version you have is old. So I think we'll finish this up, but I'll show you where it'll check for updates for the whole software. But you do want to keep these updated in general, but I think if you're at least in 26.1, you're probably going to be OK for the season. All right, and then I think that's, so in configuration, there are all these other things that you can configure. We're not going to worry about that because we're not going to really be using any of these things. But there are some things like current limits that you can play with here. But I think also all of these things are settable as well in the software, in the program when we start coding. So in the bottom right, we have this persist changes button. Make sure you click on that to save it. Now there's 0 changes pending. And that one Spark Max has now been updated. The other thing I was going to talk about, if you go to the About section, you can do check for updates. And this will reach out on the internet and see if the whole software needs to be updated, which would also then let you know when you come back here if this needs to be updated, because it would reach out, get the newest version of the Rev hardware client 2, which would then say, hey, there is a new version of firmware for the Spark Max. So if you're wondering why maybe something's not working, you could check that to see if it's updated to the latest version. If you read that there's a new version released and that you should update to it, then that's how you would do it. All right, so that is one of our Spark Maxes done. We are now going to have to get plugged into all 5 of them on the other side of the robot, and we're going to have to repeat the entire process. Okay, actually, I double-checked, and the way that first default code runs, it has the feeder motor as CAN ID 6, and then the intake and shooter motor is on CAN ID 5. So before we move on to the other Spark Maxes and repeating the same process, I'm just going to go ahead and click on the one that we're still connected to because I haven't moved on yet, and change that 5 to a 6, and then persist those changes. All right, so this one's 6, and then it looks like for drive, we're going to be doing 1 through 4. All right, so this one's good. Now I'm going to go ahead and unplug this Spark Max from the robot. So we'll get that USB cable out. And I'll go ahead and press that one back down onto the board here. And then let's see which one we can get to next. All right, so this one here in the middle, that one is labeled the intake plus launcher. So that was good that we put those blue things on, but find your intake one, I guess. We'll do that one next. And remember, when we plug this in, we want to be holding down on the button as well. So let's see if I can do that without having to take everything apart. So if I get my little thing in here, I'm pressing down on the button, and I can see the USB-C from this side, so we'll plug that in. And peeking on my screen, it looks like we're good. We have recovery devices. So I'm going to unplug the button and walk back over to my computer. Click on recovery device again. Select device, Spark Max, latest, install. Let that do its thing. This is our intake plus launcher. So this is going to be CAN ID 5. And we are going to, once again, have to swap to brushed motor in this setup. All right. There's the reboot. So now we'll click on our connected devices. CAN ID 5 for the launcher here. And then in configuration, we're going to go brushed and coast. I wonder why the last one defaulted to brake and this one defaulted to coast. I don't know. Either way, let's just double check. Everything looks good. And yeah, let's go ahead and persist those changes. So it is saved as CAN ID 5. Alrighty. Looks good. The last thing we want to update is the power distribution hub. So our big board in the middle. And on this side, next to kind of where the main power wires go in, next to the CAN wires that we're using here, there is a USB-C port, conveniently labeled USB-C. So it's going to be right next to the CAN wires, right in kind of the worst spot here to see. But we'll go right down. Let's see if I can do this again with my hand somehow fitting in here. It's going to be this port right here. And you just got to push down. That didn't click in quite as nicely as I would have expected, but our lights are flashing now, so you can see we are powering that board. And looks like for this one, I'm getting outdated device without having to go into that update mode. So there was no, let's see, oh no, it detected it. We have to find the mode button on this device as well. So where is our mode button and can we access it? So the mode button is back here, next to, even more next to the power ports. Let me see if I can get in there or not. Okay, this mode button is also a little bit smaller. So what I'm going to do is let me grab the smallest Allen wrench I have here, smallest hex key I have. So this is a 1.5 millimeter. Okay, so it might help to check and just see if we can get this to fit. I guess I'll unplug from the computer side the USB cable. So the power's off now. Would definitely help to have a second person probably. So by using the Allen wrench, I think I can try to get that point into the hole. And then once it's in, I can reach in there with my finger and try to push down on it. If you have a bent paper clip, you can probably also do that the same way. There is probably also a world where if you put a piece of wood or plastic underneath here, you could maybe even drill an extra hole through the plastic to get access to this. So, and then you'd be able to stick the Allen wrench straight down to get to it. But I'm going to try to go around. And of course, we know you can always just take the entire board out if you absolutely have to. All right, so if I can get this by reaching in lined up on that hole, looks like I got to grab right on the very edge here. I think that's in. Yep. And I can feel when I press down on it, it is clicking. So now I just have to be able to reach my finger in as far as I can. Cool. That's going. So I'm going to hold that down. I'm going to now let go of it with my other hand and plug in the USB cable on my computer side. And we are in recovery mode. All right, so I can stop jamming my finger in there, holding the button down. Select the device. This time, it is going to be the power distribution hub. And we're going to download and send the latest firmware here. And this one might take just a second longer than the other ones because we have to go back out and re-download this, this firmware. But this is the last one we have to get to. So once this is done, then I think we have to come back and we have to get our radio programmed. And then we can do the full test in wireless mode and wired mode. All right, and that looks like it finished. So let's go ahead and click here. I believe that the, also, by the way, there is this light button that you can click on. So if you're not sure which device it is, that should make it flash. I believe the power distribution hub and the Spark Maxes don't share the same necessarily IDs, but just to be safe, I'm going to change this. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 and 6, 4 for the drive, 5 and 6 for our fuel mechanism. I could leave a few extra spots, 7, 8, and 9 maybe if you wanted to add more stuff. I'm just going to go ahead and put this all the way at ID 10. Click off on that. And there's not really anything else to change here. There is apparently has a reset warning sticky fault. You can clear the faults. You'll also see things pop up on here if there were issues with any of the channels. So we can use this to see if things are shorting out or something is pulling a lot more current than expected, or if there's no communication between the power distribution hub and the RoboRio. If you clear the faults, then, so when it's a sticky fault, it's going to stay there until you get into the software to see what the fault was before, then you can clear it out. So if you don't go in and clear it out, it will just keep accumulating all the different faults that happened. But it's not going to hurt anything. If those faults are in there, it doesn't change the way it performs. If the thing that happened fixed itself, you don't need to worry about it. So in this case, probably if we didn't clear that, it would have made no difference in terms of function of the robot. All right, we are now done updating all of these devices. Let's go ahead and get that USB cable out from underneath there. And we can unplug that, I think, from the robot or from the computer as well. And let's jump back now into, I'll go ahead and close down this Rev hardware client. Let's jump back to our, where were we? Yes, in our WPI Live website. So we did imaging the RoboRio. We now have to do programming the radio. So there are a few things we need to do, but ultimately we're going to have to get this firmware file and upload it. we get the firmware file from the Vivid hosting website, and we're going to basically send that over to the radio, and that's going to basically be the firmware for this year. Now, like as we look at this page, there are some other options for how you can configure stuff. You can configure stuff with 2 radios, and that's sort of what it's saying here. Here is the robot radio configuration. So there are a few different ways that we can configure the wireless communication between the radio or the robot and our laptop or driver station computer. Now, this radio has a 6 gigahertz channel. It is 6 gigahertz. It's like the newest Wi-Fi, or not quite newest, but one of the very newest protocols. The issue with that, though, is I think there are like rules, federal communication, FCC rules, that say you cannot have an access point at 6 gigahertz that's battery fed. I don't know specifically what the rule is, but there is a law against this thing being the access point. And what I mean by access point is the thing that is going to actually broadcast the wireless network. So when you click on wireless networks on your computer and you're looking for that network to connect to, basically that's the access point or the router that you're connecting to. This is not allowed to do that at 6 gigahertz. It can do it at 2.4 gigahertz. Now, 2.4 gigahertz is kind of how we're going to set it up today, but it's not the best because the bandwidth, the amount of information that can pass back and forth at 2.4 gigahertz is not a lot. It's much slower rate of transmission of data. But the other problem, too, is depending on where you're working, a lot of times there are going to be tons and tons of 2.4 gigahertz wireless networks. And if you have a lot of those networks in the area where you're working, that can create interference or noise that will make the radio not work as well. The radio can also tend to heat up. One of the reasons why we're mounted to this metal plate is this metal plate can act kind of as a heat sink. It can suck some of the heat out of the radio and try to radiate that out into the air around it. But what can happen is if you're practicing or driving for a long period of time, the radio can heat up. When it heats up, that interference is going to be even more noticeable, or the 2.4 gigahertz channel is going to get more prone to some of those errors. So the best way to do this is if you have either a router or access point that is a 6 gigahertz access point, you can follow the instructions to set that up and have the radio connect to that access point and your laptop to connect to it. And you can do that either wirelessly with your laptop, if your laptop has wireless 6 gigahertz, or you could have an Ethernet cable plugged into that. There's also a way to reconfigure one of these radios to act as the access point. You would need to get the ability to plug that in and power it from a wall outlet from AC power. And then you can basically do different firmware on that second radio that turns that one into the access point. And again, your computer could connect to that radio either wirelessly or by plugging in. And then that radio, serving as the access point, will connect all the way over to the robot. Now, both of those options will give you that 6 gigahertz connection, which is going to run a lot better. It's going to be, you're going to have less maybe latency issues, or especially if you're using cameras or things like that where you're streaming data back and forth, it's going to be a lot kind of more reliable. The 2.4 gigahertz will work, and in fact, I know last year we used the 2.4 gigahertz. We were able to do all of our autonomous testing and our field side testing at 2.4 gigahertz with no problems. But some of that as well might just be that we're lucky in the environment we're in. So in order to set this up, let's get back to work. We know we're going to have to plug the battery back in to power the radio. So I'll plug that in. And I will go ahead and power on the robot. And then what we're going to need to do is we are going to need to, we can go to the firmware page, essentially, but we have this getting to the web configuration page. The first step is connecting the robot directly to the computer with an Ethernet cable in the DS port. So I'm going to grab a second Ethernet cable that I've got here. All right, and got kind of turn the robot a little bit more here so we can see what's going on. On the top of the radio, there is an aux1 port and a port labeled DS. That's where we want to plug this Ethernet cable in. So we want to be on that DS port. And it kind of just fits. I do kind of wish this light was maybe moved over a little bit so those were more accessible, but it'll work. All right, and then the other end of this you can plug into your laptop. If your laptop does not have an Ethernet cable or Ethernet port, which is getting more and more common, you will have to get a USB Ethernet port dongle that you can plug in to use. And those are pretty cheap, and they're all over the place. OK, so we were plugged in. That was step number 1. Step number 2, ensure the radio has power. We know it has power because the lights are blinking on it. We've got kind of all of these on the side. And in fact, I can see the light on my Ethernet port is flashing green. That might be blocked by the cable for the camera. All right, then we're going to open a web browser and navigate to robot.local, radio.local, sorry. So we'll do radio.local. And I think you can just type radio.local. This may work. This may not work for you. All right, and so it didn't find it. If it worked, you're lucky, and you're ready to move on. If it didn't work, let me go back to the right tab. Then we're going to have to take some additional steps in order to make it work. All right, so if we go to, I want to get to the Vivid hosting website. So I guess we can go to the firmware releases page to start with. And so if we scroll down a little bit, we have firmware releases for radios 1.2.x or newer. And then there is firmware releases for radios prior to 1.2. So if your radio is new this year or you used it last year, you've already updated past 1.2.x. Everything starting in, it says September of 2025, have shipped with 1.3. And I know last year we updated to a firmware that was greater than 1.2. So if you used the radio last year or it's a brand new radio since September of 2025, then you will want the 1.2.x or newer version. If this is an ancient radio that you really haven't used before, then you might need this older firmware release. But we're going to go ahead and grab this one, firmware release for radios at 1.2.x or newer, and download that. Let's see, did that start? I don't think that started downloading. Let's try again, download. But download though. There we go. All right, and I'll just save that to my downloads folder. That's fine. OK, and then, well, I clicked it so many times that it wanted to download. OK, I just had to have more patience. Next up, we can go to this Programming Your Radio at Home page. And this gives us some other options. So what happened was we weren't able to find it at the name. So that radio.local is basically a name that Windows can use to associate it to a network address to try to find things. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. On this page, there is a way around that. So if you look, we have sort of these defaults. Depending on what type of connection, it can be reached in one of 3 ways. So it looks like if we are wired, this website, or this IP address, 192.168.69.1, is going to be the way to get there. So if we go back to our other tab, we're going to do that number. So if we go to 192.168.69.1, and hit enter, and that hopefully will connect. Another thing that you can try to do, since we are plugged in right now, I can turn off my wireless as well so that this knows that I want it to use the wired connection. Sometimes that can solve the problem. All right, so that address does not seem to be working. There's some other addresses that we can check. So when I went in to look at the, if I go into my network settings again here, if we look at the Ethernet, it looks like I'm getting a 10.0.1 number. So what we can do is we can try, so the default of this is 10.0.1.1. And it does say like wireless factory default is 10.0.1.1. So we can try connecting to that address as well. So let's try 10.0.1.1. OK, and that one worked. So that seems to be what the default is. If that one works for you, that's great. I'm going to give you a couple more troubleshooting tips here if you still haven't connected to it. So it is possible that it is one of those other two numbers, but you have to assign the IP address on your computer to be able to get it to work. So on here, again, it does say, like, if you needed to manually assign your IP address, you could go in and set your computer's IP address to these numbers. You would do that by going to the network and internet settings, go to your Ethernet, and then it says IP assignment automatic DHCP. You can edit that to manual IPv4, and you can put in the IP address, subnet mask, and so on. So again, from here, IP address is this. You would put this in for subnet mask. You can leave the gateway blank. And then for DNS, you can do this or leave blank, your choice. That would be preferred DNS. And then you can ignore alternate DNS. You can ignore everything else and just save that. Sometimes if your computer is not getting an IP address that's compatible with whatever the radio is, like, you need the first three parts of the IP address to basically match. So if it's 10.0.1 or 192.168.69, if you're not getting those three numbers to be your laptop's IP address, they'll never be able to communicate. You got to get it to the right one first. So setting it automatically might help. Setting it automatically to 10.0.1.2 or something like that could work as well. So the idea is, because the radio is at 10. So something is at 10.0. or 10.yourteamnumber.1 and 10.yourteamnumber.4. You don't want to use either of those two digits if you're setting your computer up. Now, because we haven't programmed the radio yet, it's not 10.myteamnumber, it's 10.0.1. So it's basically saying if you're team number 1, this is what it would be. But the radio is set to this IP address. If I needed to set my computer's IP address, I would change that .1 to something else, like .2, or you can even do .100, just not 1 or 4. All right, so now that we're connected, though, we're ready to move on to configuring our robot. And so there are a few different things that we're going to do here. The first thing is if we set our team number. So mine was 5599. And then we can do configure. But actually, I think before we do that, we should do the firmware first. We want to update the firmware because that might reset the team number anyway. So let's do choose a file for firmware upload. And that is the file that we just downloaded. So if you go to downloads, we can pick the VH109 image that we just got. And then this checksum number here. So if we go back to the firmware page where we downloaded the firmware from, there is this SHA-256. This is just basically making sure, this is going to double check to make sure that the file is complete, not corrupted, and is the correct version. So now, if you click the copy button here, or you can highlight it and Control-C, now when we come back for the checksum, we can paste that in and then click upload. And I think that worked, but I'm going to click upload one more time. Yeah, OK, so that is uploaded. I think if we reload the page, it looks good. I don't see where we check what version is there. Oh, OK, we can't configure without changing the team number. Let's go ahead and change our team number now. So we want to be in robot radio mode. 5599. Now, we talked about if you have a second one of these radios, you could go to access point mode. And this would be you programming the second one to act as the access point. So you would have to configure one in access point mode, and that would be the one not on your robot, and then one in robot radio mode, and this would be the one that's on your robot. This is the key that you would put in to be able to connect to the wireless network. So if you have that other 6 gigahertz access point set up, you would type in the key that you put on that other one, or you could leave it open. And then same thing. This can act as the 2.4 gigahertz access point, so I can put a key in here if I want to be able to connect to it. It's probably slightly better to do it, but nobody else is really going to be connecting to your robot when you're working in your home shop. And when you go to the events, you're not allowed to use the wireless anyway. So you probably don't have to put a key in if you want to make it really easy to connect to, or just you could put something in that's very easy. So it has to be between 8 and 16 characters long. So I'm going to do robotics. Is that 8 characters long? Yeah, robotics is going to be my password. That's 8 characters long. So we'll hit configure. Invalid WPA. Oh, well, OK. Looks like you have to put one in for the 6 gigahertz as well. So they can both be robotics. That's fine. Configure. New configuration received and will be applied asynchronously. OK, so that means it is now updating, and it is setting up our team number and all of our robot settings. All right, so now we want to reconnect to our radio. Now that we've programmed the radio, it is no longer going to be at the IP address 10.0.1.1. Now it's going to be at 10. Our team number. So if we go back here, if I try to reload the page that we were just on, like we got the success that things it was configuring, but I can't reload this page. It's just going to sort of spin forever because that IP address no longer exists as a place that we can connect to. So what we want to do now is we want to reconnect not to 10.0.1, but 10. Your team number. So I chose 5599, so it's going to be 2 digits and then 2 digits. It just depends on your team number. I think it can't go more than 200 or something. So the first one is going to be the first 2 digits of your number, or and then the second one is going to be the next 3 digits. So we are now at 5599.1, and we can try to reconnect to that. And this might not work either. So what we can do, again, is if we look at our network information, if we go back to our Ethernet, we're still on this 10.0.1 IP address. If yours updated, that's great, and that will mean you don't have this problem. We can also try like radio.local again. And that seems to also not be working. So what I think we have to do now in order to get this to work is let's set our IP address specifically. So if we go into IP address settings, we're going to do a manual IP address. Let's set our IPv4. And here we need to be 10.team number. So again, mine's 5599. And then, again, choose any number. I think 2 is OK, but like you can choose any number that's bigger than kind of like 4. I don't know. So I'm going to do 15. Subnet mask is 255.255.255.0. And the gateway should be 10.55. Oh, that wasn't a dot. 55.99.1. And the preferred DNS, it said, we can leave blank, or you can just do this 10.55.99.1 a second time. So if I save that, OK, I guess it's not optional in Windows 11. It's definitely optional in Windows 10. All right, let's save it now. And you can see our IP address now changed over. So we're on that 10.55.99 network. So now if we try connecting to, well, we could try radio.local. But I think we're going to want to try 10.55.99.1. And there we go. We are now reconnected. And we can see now that it reloaded, it did save the team number. It won't show you the WPA keys that we set, but all of that looks good. All right, so I kind of want that. Kind of don't want to close that, but all right. We're going to now unplug the Ethernet cable, and I'll just unplug it from the robot side here. Doesn't really matter if it's plugged into your computer or not. And now what we're going to do is we want to connect to the 2.4 gigahertz network from our radio. So if we turn the Wi-Fi back on and look, we would like to see our team number essentially showing up. And it is not. So there is one more thing that we're going to have to do, which is there is some configuration on the radio physically that we have to do. So I'm going to get some snips to cut the zip tie off. And then we'll bring some more zip ties to be able to replace it here as well. So on the back of this radio, there is a set of 3 dip switches. Okay, and those dip switches are how we can enable the 2.4 gigahertz setting. So they're labeled 1, 2, and 3. They're all off right now. What we want to do is we want to turn dip switch number 3 to on. Okay, and I think, let me just, yep, that went all the way. Didn't like click in super nicely, but all right, so now 3 is towards the on side and 1 and 2 can stay off. All right, and then I'm going to actually unplug the radio for a second. That's going to reboot it, just in case it needs to reboot for those changes to take effect, which I think is likely. Then I'll plug it back in, make sure it goes into the Rio port. There's a port labeled Rio. Okay, and then we want the metal to work as a heat sink. So I am going to remount this. We could probably get away with doing a quick test with it not mounted, but I can already feel my radio is warming up just in general from us doing this testing right now. So I'm going to feel better having it attached against the aluminum plate here. So we'll throw both of these on real quick. Okay. And now, if we go back to the computer and try again to look for a wireless network. Now, it does take about a minute to boot. So if we don't see it right away, we're going to give it a little bit of time to hopefully pop up here. That's new. That could be it. That's not the name I would have expected, though. There we go. That's the name I would have expected. So we have FRC 5599 now, or your team number should be here. Go ahead and click on that to connect. Automatically connect, sure, why not? Enter the password. Remember, my password was robotics. Your password is whatever you chose to use. Click next. If you forgot your password already, then you just you could plug back in, go back to that configuration page, reset the password, and hit configure again. This should eventually connect. Now, what we're looking for here is, remember, we're connecting wirelessly to the robot. So we're not going to get, like, it probably will connect and say no internet or something like that, or can't connect to the internet, or connected but no internet available. That's good. That's what we want to see, because the robot is not connected to the internet. So right now I can't connect to this. Oh, I have secured. Can't connect to this network is not what we want. Is not what we want to see, I think. Yeah. All right. Let's try again. Robotics. Did I type that wrong last time? It's a good question. But this should just connect here. Also, as I'm kind of looking at the enable 2.4 gigahertz here, while we wait for this to connect, you might have a sticker over those dip switches. So you might have to remove a sticker first in order to get access to those switches to flip number 3 to the on position. All right, I must have typed the password wrong because we are now, like I said, no internet, comma, secured. That's what we want to see. So now if I go back to the browser tab, I think there's a good chance radio.local will actually work this time. Maybe. Let's double check. Was it actually radio.local, or did I get confused at some point and forget what the connection was? Radio.local. Yep. OK, well, that's still not working. But we can now try 10.55.99.1. And there we go. We're connected, again, to the robot. We can see the firmware stuff. Again, if you had to plug back in to change your key because you couldn't figure out what you typed in, you would do that and click configure. And you can see, right, we have no network cable connecting between the two, so we are wirelessly connected to the radio. So the last thing we want to do here to make sure everything is working all the way through the system is to go back and run. We're going to run that driver station software one more time. So we'll run the FRC driver station. Yes, do whatever you must. Okay, it's going to pop up. All right, and now, it was weird that it dropped out for a second, but you can see we have green communication light. We have a voltage reading in. If we go down to the diagnostics tab, what you want to be able to see here is robot radio. That means my laptop can see the robot radio. It sees the robot, so this 10.55.99.2, I believe, so I think I said you could use 2 earlier, you can't use 2. 2 is, I believe, the Robo-Rio then, right? Because that is the robot itself, is the Robo-Rio. And then our Wi-Fi light is good, and our firewall light is good. Now, some of these other ones, like FMS or eNet Link, those things only light up if you're using the Ethernet port, or FMS is the first field. When you plug in at the field for an event, that's when the FMS light will light up. So don't expect that to light up now. But if you have robot radio, robot, and Wi-Fi lit up here, you're in great shape. Firewall, if it's lit up or not lit up, it doesn't. If it's working with the firewall on, you're good. Just if it's not working, try turning the firewall off. All right, and that is what we wanted to see. So again, if you have to change your team number, it's the gear, the settings tab. Type your team number in, and then you got to click kind of out of the box for it to update. If it has your team number in this area, you are in good shape. You might be getting some errors thrown here. That's okay. We can talk a little bit more about what we're seeing in the whole driver station, but you can click on the gear here to clear warnings. Sometimes you get old messages that keep popping up, so especially when you first connect, it's good to kind of clear that out so you don't have to see it anymore. Let's see, if we go back to the main tab here, a couple other things to be aware of, right? So we talked about the different modes. You can enable and disable the robot. Now, it won't let me enable it right now because there is no robot code, which makes sense. We have not written any code. We have not uploaded any code to the robot. We do have PC battery, so this is my laptop's battery. Obviously, if that dies, you're going to lose connection to the robot, so keep an eye on that, especially at competition. The one below it, though, is kind of important as well. So this is PC CPU percent. This means not the robot's CPU. Oh, was that good? I don't know. I just saw it flicker through a bunch of things. No, sorry. Yeah, okay. Gotcha. I saw like the old Rev diagnostic tab. That's what threw me. Okay. So that's not the robot's CPU percentage usage. That is important, and that will show up in a different place. But this is the laptop's usage. So if this bar is ever full, that could mean that your laptop is basically struggling to keep up, and that can lead to communication hiccups. That can lead to like some latency when you're driving or some lag time. So if this bar starts to get full, I'd be worried. If it's not full, if you always can see a little bit of a gap, even if it's like 80, 90%, that's probably not something to worry about. Okay, and then let's see. We kind of talked about everything on this tab. We talked about having the right version of your DS should be 26, your Robo-Rio should be 2026 something. In the settings tab here, there's also the ability for you to change the practice timings. So we talked about practice mode here. Practice mode matches what happens on the field. So you would have a 5-second countdown, then you'll go into autonomous mode. Actually, I think this year, I have to double check, but I think autonomous mode is longer than 15 seconds this year. So you might have to actually change that number manually to make up for it. I thought it went to 20, but I'll double check that. Then you have a 1-second delay. Then you go into driver control mode for the remaining time. Well, not quite the remaining time. There's 30 seconds of endgame. So teleoperated plus endgame is all driver control time. But your driver station can actually play a sound for the last 30 seconds of endgame, which sometimes in some games, like in the last 30 seconds, the robot's allowed to expand bigger or start climbing or whatever. So it just gives you that indicator, that audio indicator of it is that time. Okay, then we have USB devices. This is where we're going to plug in our gamepads to get them working later. And then we have power and CAN. So this is just a place where you can see how well things are working on the robot. So right now, because we're not controlling anything, everything looks good. But you might see, like, if your CAN utilization percentage gets huge, that could potentially lead to some issues. Now, if you're just doing the kitbot as is, you basically will not need this screen. We're not pushing anything far enough to where we're going to see problems here. All right, so that is it for kind of your brief overview of the driver station. Also, we've now updated every device on our robot with new firmware. We've updated the radio. We've set up our laptop and radio to be able to communicate to each other in that 2.4 gigahertz mode. Again, I will remind you that 2.4 gigahertz mode may work for you. It's worked for me in the past, but it is not the recommended way of doing it. If you can get a hold of a 6 gigahertz access point or a second robot radio, go ahead and follow the Vivid hosting instructions to get that set up so you can have that higher bandwidth connection. The next thing that you want to do is run the Phoenix Tuner X software. We are running the preview for 2025 again because it is pre-season. So this is the version for 2025, but it's still maybe got a couple minor updates that will happen before the season starts, but nothing that's going to affect really what we're working on now. All right, so once we're in here, we need to connect to our robot. There are a couple of different ways that you can do it. You can either plug a USB cable from your computer into the RoboRio, or if you have the radio set up and the connection stuff working, you can also run the driver station software. And we'll let that go. And we can connect through the driver station. Okay, and then once the driver station runs, if you haven't, make sure you have it set up for your team number. I think I set my robot up to be team number 3 because that's a good number. And the last thing is connect to your robot's wireless network. So there is FRC3, going to connect to that. Obviously, if you don't have the radio set up or have any issues with this, just go ahead and plug a USB cable directly in, and you're going to be all good to go. Okay, so in the Tuner X software, the Phoenix Tuner X software, there are a few things that we can do. First thing is if you are connecting by driver station, kind of hit the 3 lines down here at the bottom. You can choose from driver station. If you're plugged directly into the RoboRio, then you can choose RoboRio USB. That's the other option that I use a lot. But we're doing driver station, so that's good. And then the next thing you want to do, you might have a different screen that pops up. Mine popped up 2 devices here already. But if you don't have any code on your RoboRio already, you'll probably have a different screen that's showing. And we kind of want stuff on that screen. So I'm going to go to Settings. And if you look for FRC Advanced here and open up FRC Advanced, you can run a temporary diagnostic server, which might be an option on the screen when it opens up again if you don't have any code on your RoboRio. So I'll go ahead and click on Run Temporary Diagnostic Server. And that's going to basically let us communicate and control all the stuff on here without needing any program on the robot to do that specifically. And that might take a second to pop up, but when it does, we'll be ready to go. All right, so we have success. Temporary diagnostic server is now running. And it's going to say reboot the device to revert. That means when we're done using the temporary diagnostic server and you want to go back to using your robot with whatever code you normally have on the robot, you need to reboot the robot to get that code, or at least reboot the RoboRio. All right, so we're just going to say OK. All right, so the first place I'm actually going to go, I'm going to hit the menu. I'm going to go to Canivores. So we have the one Canivore that is running our CAN-FD bus that is controlling all of the devices for our Swerve. And I'm going to update that device first. So if you go to the device, if you click on it, on the side, you'll have a bunch of options. But we're looking for where it says, mine says 2024. Yours might be a different version. If you used it last year, it's probably 2024. If you never used it and it's been sitting around, maybe it's older. If you just bought it and it's brand new, it could be 2025. But we want to pick 2025, and then underneath that, you can choose the latest version. So if there's anything newer than 25.0.0.0, pick that when you're going to do this. And once that's selected, you can choose Update Firmware. This is going to take a second. And there we go. We get on the bottom, successfully updated firmware. So I guess, CAN-IV version 1.1. OK, cool. Looks good. So that one's all set. Then if we go to the menu and go to Devices, what you'll see is we see some of our devices, but not all of them. So we know that we should be seeing 2 motors per module. We have a steer motor and a drive motor for each module, and we have a CAN coder for each module. So we should be seeing 12 things here plus the pigeon, so we should be seeing 13 devices here, and we only see 3. There are a couple of possible causes for that. The most likely, and I think what's happening to me, is that we have just too many devices that are all device ID 0, and it's just going to show us a few of the device ID 0. So as we go through and we start giving them different device IDs, the rest are going to pop up. It is possible, too, that you have a wiring issue on your robot. So first, let's go through and change the device IDs. The next step then would be to go through the robot and make sure that all of the yellow wires are connected to yellow wires, green wires are connected to green wires, and making sure that you have that 120 ohm resistor at the very end of the whole CAN chain. All right, so let's go back in. Let's start changing IDs. And the way we're going to do it is, first, we have the pigeon. This one, I guess if I click on it, we get some options over here. And you might see different stuff on the right-hand side. There are different windows that you can bring up. Don't worry about that. We're just going to be working on the left here for the most part for right now. And one of the cool things is if you click the blink button, that is going to make the device that we're currently looking at blink on the robot. So we can see on the pigeon here, we got that kind of buried in the middle of the robot. But on the pigeon, we've got like this slow blink. But when I click the blink button, which I am doing right now, you can see it starts flashing much faster and then goes back to its normal flashing pattern. So normal flashing pattern, I click the button, and then you see it's going crazy. Now, for the pigeon, not super important, because we only have one pigeon. So we know the pigeon is the pigeon. But that's going to be super important when we got to figure out which like Kraken motor we're looking at of the 8 of them, or which CAN coder we're looking at of the 8 of them. All right, so let's go ahead and update our pigeon here. Since we're in it, we'll go to 2025. Phoenix 6 looks good, and I'm going to choose the latest version. So that looks like 2502. But again, if there's a higher number than that, you should pick that when you're doing this. All right, we'll click Update Firmware. A little progress bar. That's nice. And we're good. All right, then up here where the ID is, this is where everything needs to have a unique ID. If we have a bunch of devices at ID 0 and we tell ID 0 device to do something, they'll all do it or they'll get confused. So let's change this number to, let's think about this. We're going to have 8 motors, and we're going to have 4 sensors. And I want to kind of use those starting at 0. So we'll have 0 up through whatever as those devices. So this needs to be 13 or higher. So let's set this to, I guess 12 or higher. We can set this to 12. And then you click the Set button. And you'll see the device ID change to 12. And when we go back now to the devices page, you can either do the back arrow or you can go back through the menu to devices. It's green. The border is green now on the pigeon, which means it is updated. It is running the latest firmware. We can see in the corner it is ID 12. Also, incidentally, I think you can click on this little light here from this screen to make the device blink as well. All right, so that one is now updated. There is another way to update stuff. We can actually do a bulk update of everything at once. So what I think we're going to do is go through and set the IDs and rename all of our devices, and then we can do that bulk update so we don't have to update every device individually. All right, let's go to, I guess let's do our motors first. So I'm going to click on the Talon FX over here. And you can actually see once we get in here, it actually tells me there are 8 devices with this device ID. And there is a firmware update available. So we're going to fix those things. We're going to do them one at a time. First, we have to figure out which one we're actually working with. So we're going to hit blink, and then we're going to have to look at all 8 motors and find out which one is blinking. They also will beep. The motors will beep too. All right, so that looks like, I think it's this one over here. I can see the lights going. So that is, if you look at the top, if the gears, right, so this gear, drives this big gear in the middle, that means this is the propulsion motor or the drive motor, not the steering motor. You can kind of double check that too, because if you take the wheel and you roll the wheel like it was driving, that motor is spinning. If I rotate, kind of they both spin, so it's harder to tell that way. one of them will spin more. But the easiest way is if you roll the wheel, the one that's spinning, that's the drive motor. The one that's not spinning is going to be the steering motor. So we know that was drive. I said the front of the robot in the last video was where the battery is. So let's see. So if this is the front of the robot over here, this will be the front left, which means the one that was blinking back here is back left. So that's our back left drive motor. All right, so in the software, we can do a couple things. First thing is I'm going to do the left swerve modules first. So I'll do left front as 0 and 1, left back as, well, I guess 0, 1, and 2 for the can coder. Left back will be 3, 4, and 5. So that means we want this one to be number 3, ID 3. And you can choose whatever order you want to name the things, as long as you can keep everything straight. You might want to make a list. I like to go left of side of the robot, front, then left back, then right front, then right back. But some people will do that differently. Some people will do both the fronts first and then the backs. You could do all of the drive motors first, and then all the steering motors, and then all the can coders. Just however you want to keep it organized. But another cool thing is I'm going to click set on 3 here. Another cool thing is that we can also change the name. So down here, this is Talon FX version whatever. We can actually go in here and we can remove some of this, or all of it, and type in whatever name we want. And I think this was back left. So I'm just going to do back left. And this was the drive motor, not the steering motor. So I'll do back left drive for this device and click set. And there's a good chance we might get one of these wrong, but there are several places where we'll be able to double check what we did. So we're going to go through once, get everything spread out, and then we can go through again and make sure no mistakes were made. All right, so that one is done. I'm going to click the back arrow to get back to my list of devices. And what you'll notice is now we have our back left drive on CAN ID 3. I can blink it again just to see. Yeah, it's the same one. But what's cool now is we have another Talon FX, right? We have another basically Kraken showing up here. So we'll click on the new Kraken, and it still says, hey, there's still 7 devices with this ID, and we know we're fixing that. Let's blink this one and see if we can find out which one is blinking. The beep is actually pretty helpful too, because it directs you to an area. So I think this one up here on the front. See, this one's a little bit easier to see, so hopefully we can see that blink pattern. All right, so we can see the lights down here and here, and when I click the button to blink, you can see it definitely goes into that fast blink pattern. All right, so we know this is the one that we're controlling. Again, I can tell this is going to be the drive motor again, because if I sort of rotate the front one back or follow the gears, we can see it. But again, if I spin the wheel, if I rotate the wheel like it was driving, that motor is spinning. So that is the drive motor, and that is front left. So this one, I actually want to be device 0. But if we leave it as device 0, it's hard to find the other ones. So we'll bring this one back to device ID 0 later. But let's just set it to something that's going to be completely out of the way. So I'm going to set it to 20 for now. There is a line of thought that says because all of the new devices show up as device ID 0, that skipping 0 and starting to use your actual devices from 1 and up might make more sense. So if you prefer that, start at 1. Just add 1 to all the numbers I'm using. But I'm going to keep going this way. All right, so let's also change the name like we did before. So this one is temporarily set to 20. We will come back to it later and make it our 0 item. But this is front left, and this is drive. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and click set for the name. And then let's go back to our device list once again. Once again, find the red Talon FX. We still have 6 devices here to deal with. And we're going to click the blink button and see if we can figure out which motor it is. OK, yep, and that looks like it's over here. And so that is also on our front left module. That is, of course, the steering motor then, not the drive motor. So we can go in here. That's going to then be number 1. So I'm going to do drive, steering, can coder in that order for each module. So this is number 1. And we can click set for that. And then let's replace the name. So this is front left. I'll do dash steer for steering motor and click set. OK, and we can back out. Going to keep repeating the process. Click on the stack of motors again that are red. Still got 5 devices. Let's click the blink button and see if we can find where that one is. All right, I think that is our back left module again. So I've got this one here blinking. And so that's back left. That has to be steer because we already did the drive. So that's cool. All right. So I said the front left is going to be 1, 2, 3. Back left drive is 4. Oh, sorry, 0, 1, 2. Back left is drive is 3. Steer is 4. Camcoder is 5. So this is going to be 4. So let's change our ID to 4 and click set. And change the name. This is back left steer. And set that. All right, let's back out. Click on the giant stack of red Talent FX again. And we're going to click blink. All right, I think that is back here. Yep. So that's this one. You can kind of see it here on the side. All right, and so that is the drive motor that we're seeing. All right, good. So 0, 1, 2 for the front left, 3, 4, 5 for the back left, 6, 7, 8 for the front right, which means we're 9, 10, 11 on the back. And that was, let me click blink one more time. That was this one, which is the drive motor. All right, so that means number 9, we'll set that. And rename it to back right drive. And click set. All right, let's back out one more time. Click on our motors. And blink it. All right, I think it's this one up here. Yep. Click the button, fast blinking. OK, and that is the drive motor. Cool. So front right. So we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's number 6. And we'll do set on that. OK, so we're set to 6. And we'll also change the name. This is front right drive. Click set on that. And back out we go. This is interesting. OK. We have 2 now. So it looks like there are 3 devices with this device ID running, and there are 2 devices. Well, let's find the one that's on CAN 0 and click on that again. And click blink. And let's find out which one that is. OK. Looks like that one is back right. So that one's this one back here. You can see it sort of even twitches just a little bit. So that is back right steer. OK. So back right steer is our, let's see, that's going to be 10. Right? So 0, 1, 2 for the front left, 3, 4, 5 for the back left, 6, 7, 8 for the front right, 9 for drive, 10 for steer. So click set. And then we're going to say back right and steer and set that. Back out we go. All right, we'll click on the device ID 0 again and blink that. All right, and that is hopefully our last motor. Yep. So that is this one up here. That is our front right, and that is the steering motor. OK, and front right steering should be 7. And then let's change the name. FR steer. All right, and then we'll back out again. OK. So let's see, we have no more devices. Oh, we still have the CAN coders, so we'll have to do those. So we have 1 is front left steer, and then 0 or 20 right now, because we need to change it back temporarily, is front left drive. And then number 2 is going to be a CAN coder. 3, we have back left drive. 4, we have back left steer. 5 is going to be a CAN coder. So 6 should be front right drive, and 7 is front right steer. Makes sense. And then 8 is going to be a CAN coder. And then 9 is back left drive, and 10 is back right steer. Okay, so we still have some errors here of potentially multiple devices on the same ID. Let's set all of our CAN coders now. So we have the 8 motor set. We have the pigeon set. Let's set the CAN coders and then see if there's still anything that thinks it's conflicting. So click on the CAN coder stack. And again, we're going to do blink. These, unfortunately, don't make noise. So we have to watch. I think it was this one. Oh, no, wait. This one. There we go. Yep. So we click blink. That one's going. That is back left. So back left is going to be back left is 3 and 4 are the motors, so 5 is the CAN coder. So we'll change it to 5 and click set. And then we will change the name to back left CAN coder and click set. All right, back out. Okay, we're looking for down here the red stack of CAN coders at ID 0. Click on that. Blink it again. Let's see if we can figure out which one's blinking. I think that's the front left one. Let me click it again here. Yep, that is the one that's going. So when I click blink, that one's going. That's front left. Very good. So that is going to be, so 0 and 1 are the motors, and 2 is going to be our CAN coder up there. So I'll change it to 2, click set. Change the name to front left CAN coder and click set. All right, we got 2 more to figure out. So find the ID 0 CAN coder again and blink. I think we're here. Front right, it looks like. Yep. There goes when I click the blink button. Cool. So front right, so that is 6, 7, and so this is going to be 8 is the ID. So set that. And then we will change the name, of course. Front right CAN coder. All right, we have one more CAN coder. It's not going to be red anymore because there's nothing else stacked up there, so it's just ID 0. Click on that CAN coder. It better be the back right. Yep, so when I click blink, looks like we are good on the back right. All right, so we will go ahead and switch that to, let's see, back right. This is going to be 11. And click set. And then we'll change the name to back right, oops, back right CAN coder. And click set. We are just about there. All right, so now we have all of those set. Let's also change 20 back to 0 now, because we don't have any other, none of these devices are showing up as 0. So we've done a good job of changing everything out. So if you find the device that's on ID 20, that should be front left FL drive. We'll click on that again. And we're just going to change the ID now down to 0, so it's in the order we wanted. And click set. OK, so now we want to update all of our devices for real. And I told you there were some ways that we could do it all at once instead of having to click update on every single one and wait. So on the device list, there are a few different ways you can do it. One way is there is this check icon up here, which is select all devices. That will select every single device, and then we can update it once. We're actually going to do that, but I'll show you a couple other things first. If you click on one device, like if we just want to update our Krakens and we don't want to touch the CAN coders, if you check a Kraken first and then click the check mark, it will select only our 8 Krakens. So the CAN coders here are unchecked and the pigeon is unchecked. So that way you can just update a certain type of device if you want. And another thing that you can be aware of is if you click these squares up here, it'll go to list mode. So sometimes it's nice to have the pictures to see what type of device it is, but scrolling down, if you have even more devices than this, sometimes makes it hard to see everything that's going on. So if you go to just the list mode, you can sort of see everything here and see what's checked, maybe a little bit easier. So we'll go back though. Let's click the check marks to check all. You can see every single device is checked. And then let's click that up arrow to update all devices. And at the top here, we're using Phoenix 6, and we want 2025. So I'm going to switch it to 2025. And then when I click update to the latest, it's going to find, remember I told you earlier, like I'm using 25.0.0. whatever. But if there's a bigger number, you should use that. This is going to pick the biggest number automatically. So just click update to latest and let it go. And I think you'll get a little beep every time if a motor finishes updating. You get a little beep to let it know that it's now updated to the latest firmware. All right, that took a couple minutes, I think, maybe 3 minutes over here. I forgot to check what time we started. So it will take a little bit of time if you have this many devices. Obviously, if you have more devices, it will take even longer. But that's fine. Just be aware. It will take a few minutes. It's not going to be an instant thing. That's normal. All right, but we are in. We're ready to click the OK button. Firmware update completed. You can see a list of all the stuff. And yeah, that's everything. 4 CAN coders, 8 Talon FX on our Kraken X60 motors, and the pigeon, which was already updated, but that's fine. Click OK. And then we can close down this window. And what you kind of want to see here is everything is green. You want to see green boxes, green outlines on all of this stuff. That'll mean that there's no conflict in terms of ID, and it is the latest firmware. Okay, at this point, if you're ready to start programming your robot, and we haven't released any additional materials for this year, you can check out the Swerve videos from last year, 2025. Those videos basically have setting up, configuring the Swerve drive, getting it to work in teleoperated mode, and how to incorporate Path Planner for autonomous. And that's basically all you need. You're going to have to design your own autonomous modes anyway, as well as check out First's command-based programming. So our kitbot that we did for the base kitbot was in timed robot. That's not going to really play nice with the Swerve stuff, but First has released code that you can download and use as is for command-based for the kitbot section. So for the fuel mechanism, the intake, launching, and ejecting balls out. So check out those resources. We're going to have a workshop coming up for Michigan teams, hopefully in a week or so. And so hopefully we'll see you at that workshop. If not, good luck this season. And one last time before we go, another special thanks to Argosy, First, Cross the Road Electronics, West Coast Products, Aramco, and Team 302 Lake Orion High School for hosting our studio.